What if the story of Lucifer's rebellion, the cosmic war that has defined our understanding of good and evil for millennia, is merely a shadow cast by a far greater, hidden conflict that reshaped the very fabric of existence? What if the opening verses of Genesis, those familiar words we've read countless times, conceal a war so cataclysmic that its memory was deliberately erased, deemed too dangerous for humanity to comprehend? Buckle up, because you're about to embark on a journey that will unravel the foundations of everything you thought you knew about creation, the war in heaven, and your place in God's eternal plan. This isn't just a retelling of familiar scriptures. It's an excavation of a secret so profound that ancient scribes buried it deep within the annals of sacred tradition, fearing its power to shake the faith of millions. The tale of Lucifer's fall is one we all know. A radiant angel, the morning star, consumed by pride, led a rebellion against the Creator and was cast out of heaven as a warning against hubris. It's a cornerstone of our spiritual heritage, a stark lesson about the perils of defiance. But what if this rebellion wasn't the first spark of conflict in the heavens? What if, long before Lucifer's pride took root, a celestial prince, a guardian of the divine throne, glimpsed a shadow stirring in the heart of the morning star, a darkness destined to fracture the celestial order and threaten all of creation? This prince, endowed with a terrifying gift of foresight, faced a choice that would echo through eternity. In a desperate act of righteous fury, he launched an unsanctioned war to extinguish the spark of rebellion before it could ignite, setting the stage for a conflict so devastating that its scars are hidden in the very first verses of the Bible. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. For centuries, we've been taught to see this as the blank canvas of creation, an empty stage awaiting God's creative hand to shape the mountains, seas, and skies. But what if this chaos wasn't the beginning at all? What if it was the aftermath, the spiritual wreckage of a war so profound it left the fabric of existence in tatters? Imagine a celestial battlefield, a realm beyond our comprehension, where heaven's mightiest beings clashed with a force that shook the foundations of the spiritual and physical realms. The conflict left behind a void not of emptiness, but of devastation, a scar on the universe itself. Genesis 1-2 isn't the dawn of existence. It's the echo of a war we were never meant to know, a conflict so cataclysmic that its memory was deliberately erased from the scriptures we hold dear. Ancient texts, preserved in the Aramaic commentaries and guarded rabbinic traditions like the Zohar and certain midrashic interpretations, whisper of worlds created and destroyed before our own. These fragmented scrolls speak of a celestial prince, an Archon tasked with protecting the sanctity of heaven's throne, who was granted a chilling gift, the ability to see the currents of eternity. In those currents, he glimpsed a horrifying future, the morning star, the most brilliant of all angels, nurturing a seed of pride that would grow into a shadow capable of fracturing heaven, leading a third of the angels into ruin, and unleashing suffering on a creation yet to be born. This Archon was no ordinary angel. He was a sentinel of divine order, a guardian whose duty was to stand watch over the throne of God itself. His foresight was both a blessing and a curse, revealing a destiny that shook him to his core. He saw the morning star's pride blossoming into a rebellion that would tear apart the harmony of heaven, casting a shadow over the divine plan. Faced with this knowledge, the Archon made an impossible choice. Driven by a fierce loyalty to God and a desperate need to protect creation, he acted without divine command, launching the preemptive war to purge the darkness before it could spread. This was no rebellion against God, it was an act of celestial justice, a swift and terrible conflict designed to extinguish the shadow before it could become a consuming fire. But it was unsanctioned, a decision born of righteous fury rather than divine mandate. The clash was beyond comprehension, a cataclysm that didn't just shatter worlds, but fractured the very spiritual realm, leaving behind a chaos described in Genesis as without form and void. The darkness upon the face of the deep was no mere absence of light, it was the spiritual debris of this forgotten war. The scars of a battle fought before time as we know it began. When God declared, "Let there be light," it wasn't merely the birth of creation. It was a divine act of restoration, a command that pushed back the lingering shadows of a conflict so devastating its memory had to be sealed away. Why was this story erased from Scripture? The answer lies in its dangerous implications. The Archon's tale presented a hero who acted outside divine authority, blurring the line between righteous zeal and defiant pride. Ancient scribes and early church fathers feared this ambiguity would unsettle the faithful, planting questions about whether one could defy God's timing or will for a perceived greater good. To protect a simple, unshakable doctrine, they buried this complex truth, reducing the cosmic struggle to the single clear narrative of Lucifer's rebellion. But in doing so, they hid the true scale of the war in heaven and the identity of the first being who stood against the darkness. The book of Job offers a subtle clue to this hidden history. God asks Job, "Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth, while the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy?" We've long imagined this as a moment of peaceful celebration at creation's dawn. But what if it was something else entirely? What if this was a chorus of relief, a collective sigh from the heavenly host after a terrible war had been resolved? What if Genesis wasn't the beginning of all things, but a divine rebuilding project, a restoration of order on the ruins of a conflict too devastating to remember? To fully grasp the weight of this hidden history, we must delve deeper into the Archon's role and the nature of the war he waged. He was not merely a guardian but a sentinel of divine order, a being of immense power whose foresight made him both a protector and a tragic figure. His vision of the morning star's pride was not a vague premonition but a vivid prophecy of destruction, a rebellion that would lead to the fall of countless angels and the suffering of a creation yet to come. The Archon's choice to act was born of love for God and creation, but it was a choice made in isolation, without the explicit command of the Creator. The war he waged was swift and devastating, a clash of celestial forces that left the spiritual realm in disarray. The chaos described in Genesis was not an unformed planet, but a battlefield, the spiritual debris of two of heaven's mightiest beings locked in combat. The darkness upon the face of the deep was the echo of their struggle, a scar on the fabric of existence that God's light would later reclaim. This war wasn't just a physical or spiritual event, it was a metaphysical rupture, a fracture in the very structure of reality that required divine intervention to restore. The ancient texts offer further clues to this forgotten conflict. Rabbinic traditions, particularly those preserved in the Zohar and certain midrashic commentaries, speak of worlds created and destroyed before our own. The Hebrew phrase, tohu vabo, without form and void, is not merely a description of emptiness, but a reference to the shattered remnants of a previous order. These texts suggest that our world was not the first, that God's act of creation in Genesis was a response to a devastation we can scarcely imagine. The Zohar, for instance, describes a primordial chaos that predates the physical universe, a state of disorder that required God's light to bring order. Could this chaos be the aftermath of the Archon's war, the spiritual debris left behind by a conflict that shook the heavens? Other apocryphal texts, such as the Book of Enoch, hint at celestial battles and angelic hierarchies that predate human history, suggesting a complex cosmic order that was disrupted long before the creation of Adam and Eve. These texts, though excluded from the canonical Bible, were known to early scholars and provide a glimpse into the hidden history that the scribes sought to suppress. This forgotten war also sheds light on the nature of evil itself. We've been taught that evil entered creation through Lucifer's pride, a sudden storm that disrupted the perfection of heaven. But the Archon's story reveals a more complex reality. Evil was a creeping plague, a shadow that grew slowly until one guardian sought to stop it. His failure, or perhaps his partial success, left a scar that God's light would later heal. This perspective transforms our understanding of Genesis, revealing it not as a story of beginnings, but as a divine counteroffensive, a reclamation of a creation scarred by a conflict that predates humanity. The Garden of Eden, then, was not just a paradise but a sanctuary established on reclaimed territory, a place where God sought to restore what had been lost. The temptation of Adam and Eve was not the first move in the cosmic chess game but a strategic counterattack by the forces of darkness. Seeking to reclaim what God had restored, the suppression of the Archon story was not a passive act of forgetting but a deliberate choice by those who shaped the canon of Scripture. In the great councils where the Bible was debated and finalized, texts that spoke of this pre-Genesis war were set aside, labeled apocryphal not because they were false, but because they were deemed too unsettling for the faithful. The early church fathers and rabbinic sages sought to forge a stable faith for millions, and the story of a hero who acted outside divine command threatened that stability. They feared it would sow seeds of doubt, leading believers to question God's timing or authority. So they built a wall around the accepted narrative, leaving the Archon story on the outside, sealed away from view. But in doing so, they hid the true scale of the spiritual war and the depth of God's plan to reclaim His creation. This hidden history forces us to reconsider the entire narrative of creation. The Garden of Eden wasn't just a paradise. It was a sanctuary built on a reclaimed battlefield, a place where God sought to restore what had been lost. The temptation of Adam and Eve wasn't the first strike in the cosmic war, but a strategic counterattack in a conflict that began long before humanity existed. God's plan wasn't merely salvation from a single fall. It was a grand reclamation of a creation scarred by a forgotten war. Ancient traditions, preserved in texts like the Zohar and certain rabbinic commentaries, hint at a primordial world of light, a spiritual garden that existed before our physical universe. This realm, inhabited by celestial beings, was the first casualty of the Archon's war, its light imprisoned in the chaos of the conflict. When God said, "Let there be light," He wasn't creating from nothing. He was liberating a trapped essence, weaving it into the stars, the sun, the moon, all echoes of a brilliance that predated our world. This raises a chilling question. If Eden was a restored paradise for humanity, who was the first garden for? The answer points to a chapter of existence so ancient, it makes the story of Adam and Eve seem like a recent footnote in the cosmic saga. To explore this further, let's consider the nature of the primordial light described in ancient traditions. The Zohar speaks of a light of the hidden, a divine radiance that existed before the physical universe, a light that was both spiritual and metaphysical, sustaining the celestial order. Could this light have been the essence of the first garden, a realm inhabited by celestial beings before the Archon's war shattered it? When the war erupted, this light was imprisoned, trapped in the chaos of the conflict, and God's command to let there be light was an act of liberation, releasing this divine essence to form the foundation of our physical world. The sun, the moon, the stars, they are not just celestial bodies, but echoes of this primordial light, woven into the fabric of our reality as a reminder of what was lost and what God sought to restore. This perspective transforms our understanding of creation, suggesting that God was not merely building a new world, but salvaging the remnants of a lost one. A divine act of restoration that set the stage for humanity's role in the cosmic drama. This hidden history also sheds light on the role of humanity in God's plan. We were not an afterthought, a mere footnote in the story of heaven's conflict. We were God's answer to the pride that fractured the celestial order. Placed in a restored Eden, a sanctuary built on a former battlefield, humanity was given a choice the angels lacked: to love God freely, not just serve Him out of duty. Our existence is a testament that loyalty born of love is stronger than any celestial rebellion. This perspective adds urgency to our spiritual lives, revealing that we are not the first soldiers in this war, but part of a struggle that began before time itself. Every choice we make, every act of faith, echoes back to that primordial conflict, aligning us with God's plan to restore what was lost. The clues to this hidden history are scattered throughout Scripture, waiting to be uncovered by those who seek deeper truths. Consider the imagery in the Psalms, where God is described as treading upon the seas and crushing the heads of chaos monsters. Could these be echoes of the primordial war, metaphors for the divine act of restoring order to a realm shattered by conflict? Or look to the prophetic visions of Daniel, where celestial beings battle forces of darkness in the heavens. These passages, often read as symbolic, may point to a literal conflict that predates human history, a war whose aftermath shaped the very creation we inhabit. The book of Isaiah, too, offers hints, with its references to the day of the Lord and the judgment of celestial powers. These verses, when viewed through the lens of the Archon's war, take on new meaning, suggesting a cosmic struggle that began long before humanity's creation. The apocryphal texts provide even more insight. The Book of Enoch, though not part of the canonical Bible, describes a complex angelic hierarchy and celestial battles that predate the creation of the earth. It speaks of angels who kept not their first estate, a phrase that echoes the rebellion of Lucifer, but may also point to the earlier conflict initiated by the Archon. These texts, known to early Jewish and Christian scholars, were excluded from the canon not because they were false, but because they were deemed too complex, too unsettling for the average believer. The early church fathers, in their efforts to create a unified faith, sought to simplify the narrative, focusing on the clear, cautionary tale of Lucifer's fall while suppressing the story of the Archon and the war that preceded it. This suppression was not without consequence. It altered our understanding of evil, presenting it as a sudden storm rather than a creeping plague that one loyal guardian sought to purge. The Archon's story also raises profound theological questions about the nature of divine authority and free will. By acting without God's command, the Archon walked a fine line between loyalty and defiance, a paradox that challenges our understanding of obedience. Was his war a righteous act, born of love for God and creation? Or was it a tragic overreach, a precursor to the very pride he sought to prevent? The ancient scribes, in their wisdom or fear, chose to bury this question, fearing it would lead believers to question the absolute authority of God. But for those willing to grapple with this ambiguity, the Archon's story offers a deeper understanding of the complexity of the cosmic struggle. It suggests that God's plan is not a simple, linear narrative, but a tapestry of redemption, woven from the threads of countless choices, both human and celestial, that shape the destiny of creation. This hidden history also transforms our understanding of God's character. We've been taught to see him as a creator who began with a blank canvas, crafting a perfect world from nothing. But the story of the Archon's war reveals God as a restorer, a king who stepped into the wreckage of a fallen kingdom to reclaim what was lost. Every act of creation in Genesis was an act of pushing back the chaos, of bringing light to a place where a terrible fire had burned. The sun, the moon, the stars, they are not just celestial bodies, but echoes of a primordial light that existed before the physical universe. A light that was imprisoned by the Archon's war and liberated by God's command. This perspective transforms how we read every word of Scripture that follows. The Bible becomes not just a history of humanity, but a chronicle of a cosmic restoration. A plan so vast it began before time and continues to unfold in our lives today. The implications of this truth extend beyond theology to the very core of our spiritual lives. If the war in heaven began before humanity existed, then our existence is not a mere accident, but a deliberate response to the pride that fractured the celestial order. We were created to demonstrate that love, freely given, is stronger than any rebellion, celestial or human. Our choices, our faith, our struggles, They are all part of a cosmic drama that began before the foundations of the world were laid. This perspective adds a new urgency to our spiritual lives, reminding us that we are not just living for ourselves, but participating in a war that spans eternity. Every act of kindness, every moment of faith, every choice to stand against darkness is a continuation of the Archon's battle, a declaration that the light of God will prevail. This hidden history also explains the presence of evil in a world created by a good God. We've long wrestled with the question of why a perfect creator would allow a tempter in the Garden of Eden. The story of the Archon provides an answer. The tempter was not a new arrival but a remnant of a war that had already been fought. The serpent's presence in Eden was not the first move in the cosmic chess game, but a counterattack, a continuation of a conflict that began in the heavens. God's plan, then, was not merely to create a perfect world, but to restore a creation scarred by conflict, to transform a battlefield into a sanctuary where humanity could choose love over pride. This perspective deepens our understanding of salvation, revealing it as a multifaceted plan that encompasses not just humanity's fall, but the restoration of all creation. The story of the Archon also invites us to reconsider the nature of light itself. When God said, "Let there be light," we imagine the creation of the sun, the stars, the physical radiance that illuminates our world. But what if this light was something more? Ancient traditions speak of a primordial light, a divine radiance that existed before the physical universe, a light that sustained the celestial order and was shattered by the Archon's war. When God spoke those words in Genesis, He was not creating light from nothing, but liberating it from the chaos of the conflict, weaving it into the fabric of our world. The stars, the sun, the moon, they are echoes of this primordial light, reminders of a realm that existed before our own, a realm that God sought to restore. This perspective transforms our understanding of creation, suggesting that every beam of light we see is a testament to God's victory over the darkness that once engulfed it. This hidden history also raises profound questions about the nature of the first garden. If Eden was a restored paradise for humanity, what was the first garden, the spiritual realm that existed before the physical universe? Who was it for? The ancient texts offer tantalizing hints, suggesting that this primordial garden was a place of pure light, inhabited by celestial beings who existed in perfect harmony with God. The Archon's war shattered this harmony, plunging the spiritual realm into chaos and necessitating God's act of restoration. This raises the possibility that humanity's role in the cosmic drama is far greater than we've ever imagined. We were not created to replace the angels, but to fulfill a purpose they could not. To demonstrate that love, freely chosen, is the ultimate answer to pride. Our existence is a testament to God's plan to restore not just the physical world, but the spiritual order that was shattered by the Archon's war. The suppression of this story was not without consequence. By hiding the Archon's war, the ancient scribes simplified the narrative of evil, presenting it as a sudden storm rather than a creeping plague that one loyal guardian sought to purge. This simplification made the story of Lucifer's fall more accessible, but it also obscured the complexity of the cosmic struggle. It hid the true scale of God's plan, a plan that began not with the creation of humanity, but with the restoration of a creation scarred by conflict. This perspective transforms our understanding of salvation, revealing it as a plan that spans eternity, encompassing not just humanity's fall, but the restoration of all creation. The Apostle John writes in Revelation of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. What if this is more than spiritual poetry? What if, the moment pride stirred in heaven, God's perfect answer was already declared? Christ wasn't a backup plan, He was the plan. The entire saga of humanity, our creation, the giving of the law, the restoration of Genesis was designed to be the stage for a moment ordained before the Archon's war, the cross. where sacrificial love would triumph over pride and reclaim creation with divine light. This truth was hidden not to be lost, but to be found by those ready to embrace the magnificent scale of God's eternal plan. You're here because you sense there's more to the story, a depth beyond simple answers. This is your invitation to step into a faith that sees the Bible as the chronicle of a cosmic restoration still unfolding. The war in heaven didn't end with a fall, it ends with a victory, and you're part of it. This revelation forces us to see God in a new light, not as a creator who began with a blank canvas, but as a restorer who stepped into the wreckage of a fallen kingdom. Every act of creation in Genesis was an act of pushing back the chaos, of bringing light to a place where a terrible fire had burned. The sun, the moon, the stars, they are echoes of a primordial light that existed before the physical universe. A light that was imprisoned by the Archon's war and liberated by God's command. This perspective also transforms our understanding of our role in the cosmic drama. We were not an afterthought, a mere footnote in the story of heaven's conflict. We were God's answer to the pride that fractured the celestial order. Placed in a restored Eden, a sanctuary built on a former battlefield, humanity was given a choice the angels lacked: to love God freely, not just serve Him out of duty. Our existence is a testament that loyalty born of love is stronger than any celestial rebellion. This perspective adds urgency to our spiritual lives, reminding us that we are not just living for ourselves, but participating in a war that spans eternity. Every act of kindness, every moment of faith, every choice to stand against darkness is a continuation of the Archon's battle. A declaration that the light of God will prevail. The story of the Archon also invites us to reconsider the nature of Scripture itself. The Bible is not just a collection of stories or moral teachings, it is a chronicle of a cosmic restoration, a plan that began before time and continues to unfold in our lives today. Every verse, every chapter, is part of a larger tapestry, woven from the threads of countless choices, both human and celestial, that shape the destiny of creation. The suppression of the Archon's story was a human act, born of fear, but God's truth cannot be hidden forever. The clues are there, scattered throughout Scripture, waiting to be uncovered by those who seek deeper truths. The Psalms, with their imagery of God treading upon the seas and crushing chaos monsters, may be echoes of the primordial war. The visions of Daniel, with their celestial battles, may point to a conflict that predates human history. Even the prophetic books, with their references to the day of the Lord, hint at a cosmic struggle that began before the foundations of the world were laid. This hidden history also raises profound questions about the nature of faith. We've been taught to see faith as a simple act of trust, a willingness to follow God's commands. But the Archon story suggests that faith is more complex, a willingness to grapple with ambiguity, to trust God's plan even when it defies our understanding. The Archon's war was an act of faith, born of love for God and creation, but it was also a tragic overreach, a choice that blurred the line between loyalty and defiance. This paradox challenges us to rethink our own faith, to consider whether we are willing to trust God's timing, even when the shadows of darkness seem overwhelming. It invites us to see faith not as a simple path, but as a journey through a cosmic landscape, where every step is part of a larger battle. This revelation also deepens our understanding of Christ's role in the cosmic drama. We've been taught that Christ's sacrifice was a response to humanity's fall, a plan to redeem a broken world. But the story of the Archon's war suggests that Christ's role was ordained before the foundations of the world were laid, before the Archon ever saw his vision, before the first celestial battle was fought. The cross was not a reaction to human sin, but the culmination of a plan that began in the heavens, a plan to restore a creation scarred by conflict. This perspective transforms our understanding of salvation, revealing it as a cosmic act of reclamation, a victory that echoes back through eternity to silence the pride that first fractured heaven. This hidden history also invites us to reconsider the nature of our world. If Genesis is not the beginning but a restoration, then our world is not a pristine creation but a reclaimed battlefield, a place where the light of God continues to push back the shadows of a war fought before time began. The stars we see in the night sky, the sun that warms our days, the moon that lights our nights, they are not just celestial bodies, but echoes of a primordial light, reminders of a creation that was lost and restored. This perspective transforms how we see our world, inviting us to see every moment of beauty, every act of love, as a continuation of God's work of restoration. The story of the Archon also challenges us to rethink our understanding of history itself. We've been taught to see human history as the central story of creation, a narrative that begins with Adam and Eve and continues through the ages. But the Archon's war suggests that human history is just one chapter in a much larger story, a cosmic saga that began before the foundations of the world were laid. This perspective invites us to see ourselves as part of a larger narrative, a story that encompasses not just humanity, but the entire creation, from the celestial realms to the physical world. It challenges us to see our lives as part of a cosmic drama, where every choice we make, every act of faith, is a continuation of the battle that began in the heavens. This hidden history also raises profound questions about the nature of God's plan. We've been taught that God's plan is a simple story of creation, fall, and redemption. But the story of the Archon's war suggests that God's plan is far more complex, a tapestry woven from countless threads, each representing a choice, a battle, a moment of restoration. The creation of humanity, the giving of the law, the coming of Christ, all are part of a larger plan to restore a creation scarred by conflict. This perspective deepens our understanding of God's love, revealing it as a love that has been fighting for creation since before time began. It invites us to see God not just as a creator, but as a restorer, a king who stepped into the wreckage of a fallen kingdom to reclaim what was lost.